Ernest Perry checks in to say go Dogs. A lot of folks may remember that the great William the Refrigerator Perry it's one of the most iconic probably sports teams of my early childhood. 85 Bears, William Perry, very famous there on that. It's probably the first NFL season I have a very keen memory of was the 1985 season. Of course, the 85 Bears, I would say one of the best teams of all time, and William Perry, kind of one of the iconic figures on that team. Our buddy William Perry in the comments section has the same name, but as he's taking on here a slightly different nickname, so that's good to be able to see. Brian Whitehead checks in there as well to say, good morning, Dog Nation. Counting down the days till G-Day. It'll be here before you know it. We are in the month of April, and April 16th will be here before you know it. We said before, we're kind of in that great time of year for sports this week in particular, with the Final Four coming to a conclusion, the Masters taking place, Major League Baseball opening day, and then this early month, when you kind of roll from all of that, the excitement of that to the Georgia spring game, and then for the folks who like the NBA playoffs and the NHL playoffs, that's coming up really soon there as well. This is just kind of a cool time to be a sports fan, so that is really good to be able to see. Are we on the other platforms now? So good morning to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch folks. Hello to all of you. We appreciate you being here and a part of what we're doing here today. And for all of you, check in on the Dog Nation homepage and the Dog Nation app each and every morning for our first and 15, including today when we actually did start at 9:45. Hello to you. And just thanks so much for making this a lot of fun. So busy show for us. It's Connor Riley on all the stuff happening for Georgia spring practice. It's a special guest appearance today from former Georgia running back Keith Marshall on what the Dogs have in his position group for the upcoming season, and some cool things going on with our friends at the Players Lounge as we head towards G-Day weekend. This is just a really, really fun show. A couple of big announcements for us, and one of these is a reminder of an announcement I've already made, and another one of these is a big announcement about something fun I'm going to be doing on G-Day Saturday. So we'll cover all of those bases with you and look at everything else going on with UGA and around the world of college football and the SEC. So happy to have you with us as DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Dial 678-ESOG now for a solution to your foundation and waterproofing problems.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
One of the things I enjoy doing, especially this time of year, is to kind of monitor the conversation that's taking place nationally. And sometimes on this show, I'll just be, someone that kind of points in that direction and say, hey, here's what people outside the bubble of Dog Nation are saying about UGA right now. Because, for those of you, and I've said this to our video audience before, and actually it's just this couple of moments ago, for those of you who, are tuned in to watch the show each and every day, you are very zoomed in on Georgia. We do a show that's probably a little deeper than maybe like the average casual fan here. We talk about, we talk to fans that are pretty well aware of the entire roster, pretty well aware of the, how Georgia fits into the rest of the landscape around college football. The average person who watches, reviews, listens to DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, that's a pretty plugged in, tuned in person. And sometimes, being that zoomed in on something gives you a slightly different perspective. And so to kind of go outside that bubble and just kind of find out what national media is saying from time to time, I just think that's kind of an appropriate thing to do, just to kind of give you a little bit of a sense for what folks who are maybe not quite as vested into the topic are kind of saying, especially this time of year, because I've never made any apologies for the fact that I like what is kind of known as the talking season, the time when you're making these wild predictions or when you're, just kind of throwing out hypothetical scenarios. One of the ways in which college football fans, or just sports fans in general, show their love for sports is by arguing about it or making opinions about it. And, I think this time of year is when we kind of lay the groundwork for the conversation we'll have throughout the fall. And I think all of that is really fun, and especially fun in this era that we're in for Georgia football, because whatever national conversation you're going to have, playoff contenders, repeating national champions, whatever else, Georgia, because of its national championship status, is going to be right in the middle of seemingly every conversation that could take place, other than maybe one. Because if you look at the top odds to win the 2022 Heisman Trophy, right now, you don't really see a obvious Georgia name among that top list of favorites, even though Georgia is among the short list of favorites to be back in the playoff and maybe even win the national championship. Right now, that's not really reflected in the current Heisman odds. And there's a national podcast. It's run by CBS. It's called Cover 3, and you got Bud Elliott on there, and Danny Cannell's on there. There's a writer named Tom Fornelli on there. Chip Patterson's often on there. It's like, they call it Cover 3, but it's more than 3 people usually, which is kind of its own weird thing, I guess. But nonetheless, they were kind of having a conversation where they were drafting their Heisman picks for the upcoming year. In other words, this is not my outright pick to win the award, but here are the guys I think could win it. And basically, they were trying to reflect their thoughts on the Heisman Trophy by selecting guys they thought might win. And so it's 4 guys. They each drafted 4 people. That's 16 names, not a Georgia name on the list. And that's kind of interesting, not unexpected, as we said before. Right now, Georgia does not really have a guy among the upcoming favorites to win this year's award. But near the end of this podcast, in discussing who they did pick and the fact that they did not take a Georgia name, for about 45 seconds here, the conversation got pretty interesting about kind of, what that means. And then one of the guys in the show, a writer for CBS named Tom Fornelli, did make a case for a couple of Georgia guys. Now, this is not interesting because of who says it, because I don't know that Tom Fornelli, with all due respect, is necessarily moving the meter too much in terms of how the Heisman Trophy is going to be decided. But I do think this reflects kind of a new age in which we live now, where kind of weird, unorthodox stuff, I believe, is just more possible now than it has been in the past, where, we have typically thought of Heisman Trophy as kind of just being a quarterback's award. And last year, a quarterback did win the award. But in recent years, we've seen examples of, hey, it's more than just quarterbacks who are going to get consideration here. So for a couple of minutes off the top of the program here today, let me give you this. You're going to hear Danny Cannell on the subject of a Georgia guy getting consideration for the Heisman, and then Tom Fornelli suggests us a couple of names that I think those of us inside the bubble of DawgNation ought to give some credence to and ought to give some consideration for maybe a slightly unorthodox Heisman campaign re-emerging again in 2022 after what happened for Jordan Davis a year ago. This from the CBS Cover 3 podcast.
I don't know who to go with. The fact we don't have a Georgia player on here is probably a mistake. Whether take one of the running backs, take a backup quarterback, take Stetson Bennett.
The 2 Georgia players I think are most likely are, one, Jalen Carter, who, again, defensive player, don't expect to win, so I wasn't going to draft him. But Brock Bowers, just because the way Stetson Bennett plays, he prefers the middle of the field up the seams. That's where Brock Bowers lives. He's a good athlete. He's got good hands. We saw it last year. So I feel like Bowers could put up really good season, but he's kind of a tight end, and I don't know how much traction he's really going to get in the Heisman race.
So that's Tom Fornelli, CBS Sports, saying, hey, if I'm going to give Georgia names for the Heisman Trophy, I'm giving you Jalen Carter, I'm giving you Brock Bowers. And as he alludes to, one guy's a defensive lineman, one guy's a tight end. How much traction can they really get? But I don't take that as a rhetorical question. I take that as a reasonable and fair question. How much traction could a defensive lineman get? Well, at one point in time last year, our hashtag JD to NYC got quite a bit of traction. CBS was talking about it on TV. ESPN was talking about it on TV. All the major websites were writing about it. Ultimately, didn't happen. Davis did not end up being a Heisman finalist, but he got plenty of discussion for that award during the season. And another defensive guy, Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan, did go on to become a Heisman finalist. So could Jalen Carter get some consideration for the award this year? Well, if Davis got as much as he did last year and Hutchinson got as much as he did, then why couldn't Jalen Carter potentially get some of that, especially knowing that the reputation of the Georgia defense was raised so much last year because of how it performed in 2021. It's almost as if Jordan Davis walked so Jalen Carter could run. Now, I'm not predicting that Carter's necessarily going to be a Heisman finalist, but just given the fact that you did have the campaign for Davis last year, that you had the emergence of Hutchinson last year, if Jalen Carter would have a very big year for UGA, I would say it's not impossible that he does get some Heisman consideration. Probably not likely, but not impossible either. And on the flip side of that, with Brock Bowers, first of all, on the notion that Bowers thrives because that's who Bennett likes to throw to, when Stetson Bennett was not the starting quarterback for Georgia and JT Daniels was against Clemson, he also threw to Brock Bowers that day 3 times more than he threw to anybody else. Any quarterback that could play with Brock Bowers is going to throw to him more than anybody else on the roster because Brock Bowers is that good. If you look at his stats a year ago, it wasn't just record-setting from a tight end standpoint or record-setting from a Georgia standpoint. It was basically as good as almost any receiver in the SEC. You'd still take Jamison Williams' numbers over his. You might take Treylon Burks, but I don't believe you're necessarily taking anybody else's production over what Brock Bowers gave you a year ago. And even though tight end, I should say the Heisman Trophy position is kind of thought of as this sort of quarterback's award and tight end can't do it, with Bowers putting up the numbers that he did, keeping in mind that just 2 seasons ago, a wide receiver won the Heisman Trophy. That, this notion that, well, it's only quarterbacks that can do this. We've seen more unorthodox Heisman campaigns in recent years than probably any time in recent memory before that. Now, obviously, Devontae Smith put up like Herculean numbers, and I don't expect Brock Bowers to necessarily do that. But given the attention that Bowers got during his freshman season, and given when he's back healthy again, when he has a chance to do for the upcoming year, I don't completely rule it out either. So hear what I'm saying on this. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I think that Tom Fornelli's probably right, that guys like Jalen Carter and Brock Bowers are certainly long shots in a award conversation like this. But when you look at recent precedent within the sport, Devontae Smith winning it, Aiden Hutchinson being a finalist, Jordan Davis getting plenty of attention, it's not impossible to think that either Carter or Bowers, or maybe even some combination of both, could emerge as a part of the Heisman conversation later on this season. We'll follow that, see how it goes. Now, for something completely different here for about 90 seconds or a couple of minutes, there was something that happened yesterday that got a lot of attention. And this is totally silly, and as I said before, as someone who kind of enjoys the talking season of college football, there is nothing more talking season than this. There is a University of Washington themed fan account that put out a poll on Twitter. Let me just show you the poll here at first, because this was the thing that got a ton of attention from Georgia fans. So there's this guy that runs his Twitter account. It's not even a huge account. It doesn't have tons of followers or anything, but it's called Husky Football Opinions. And the question was, who has the better claim to go Dogs? Is it Washington or is it Georgia? Now, this was probably news to a lot of Georgia fans that Washington even tries to claim the Go Dogs. But I was kind of aware of this because a couple of years ago, the Huskies actually wore Go Dogs on the side of their britches before a game. They had the Go Dogs thing on their pants for a football game. So that's kind of how I became aware of this. And apparently this is a thing with some Washington fans. And so the Husky guy puts it out there, who has the better claim to Go Dogs, Washington or Georgia? And as some of you pointed out to me, and I'll show you the results here, one of our good friends on Twitter kind of shared this with me, our buddy Jermaine King, letting us know that after 10,000 votes in this poll had been cast, which I promise you is a lot of votes for an account like this, 90% of those surveyed take Georgia as the better Go Dogs over Washington. Now, there is a lot of this stuff in college football, right? There's two Death Valleys. There's Death Valley in Clemson. There's Death Valley in LSU. Not only do like Clemson and Auburn and Missouri and teams like that all have the same mascot, but they also all have the same, that one sort of cartoonish old school Tiger logo. At various times they've all used that same logo, which is kind of bizarre in its own right. There's two USCs. There's South Carolina. There's Southern Cal. There's almost anything that you want to mention here, there's another school that has something pretty similar. Auburn and Georgia play similar fight songs. There's obviously another Bulldogs in the SEC. So two teams kind of claiming the same turf is not new. But this whole issue that somehow Washington is Go Dogs, I have to say that has always aggravated me, and I'm happy to see Georgia fans responding in such large numbers to say, no, the Huskies are not the Dogs. To me, it's as simple as this. This is how Southern people talk. Like, this is not how people in Seattle talk, including, my good buddy Andy Bunker. I'll be on with the folks in the midday show, 92.9 The Game, in Atlanta a little later on today. Andy's from Seattle, and Andy does not say dogs. Folks who, like me, grew up in Hall County, Georgia, we say dogs. That's why it started being spelled that way, DAWGS, because that is how we talk. So this got a lot of attention from some folks yesterday, and I have to admit it's always been kind of a thorn in my side too. Now, in defense of the Twitter dude here, I sort of think he knew it was going to go this way, and I think he was just doing it as a joke. I still don't quite understand why he put it up there. I think he sort of knew he was going to get bombarded by UGA fans on this, because that's just kind of the thing that UGA fans kind of do when they have a chance to rally around a cause like that. But can we dispense with the notion that people in Seattle even talk that way? They don't say dogs. They say whatever it is they say. But down here, we say dogs. That's why it's spelled with the drawl DAWGS. And if I had my way, that'd be the official spelling of the word anyway. But nice to see Georgia fans stepping up and making their case as the true Go Dogs that exist in college football. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is Dawg, D-A-W-G, DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia. By the way, there is no DawgNation Daily in Seattle. That's one thing I'm fairly confident in saying. They may have a 12-man show up there. They may have something like that. the Kraken. They think they have a Kraken, a daily podcast for the Kraken, their NHL team, but there is no DawgNation Daily in Seattle. I feel pretty good about us saying that. But nonetheless, we are here for you each and every day and glad to be here. And a big thanks to our friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia for making it all possible. 945, 1st and 15, DawgNation.com and the DawgNation app. 10 a.m. after that, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 96 The Ref, podcast, Apple, Spotify, all the various podcast platforms. Just very happy to have you a part of what we're doing today. We also have a very busy show for you. Coming up in a moment, Connor Riley going to be on hand. Keith Marshall, special guest, Georgia running back, coming up later on after that. And of course, all this made possible by our friends at ESOG here today. Engineered Solutions of Georgia, the ones you turn to when it comes to foundation waterproofing issues. I was getting ready to do the show this morning. There was a big storm erupting outside. Big storms mean big rains, and big rains for many of you mean problems, means anxiety, because you see water creeping into your house in a way that's just not supposed to, whether it's your garage, your crawl space, obviously your basement. Some of you have flooded basements before. And listen, you want to take steps to make sure that doesn't happen, or take steps to repair what's been broken, because that has happened, what's been damaged because of that. That's where Engineered Solutions of Georgia can step up. They can help waterproof your house, protect it. Also for foundation issues. You see those cracks in the wall. You see them in your foundation. You see examples of things that might be a little bit of a sign that things aren't great. And it's easy to want to put that off and not do anything about that. That's, as you know, a huge mistake. You want to reach out to my friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Now, the reason why is because they are so good when it comes to stuff like this. They just know what's going on. They have 2 full-time engineers on staff, smart people who do good work for you. That is what they're capable of doing. They also are proud partners of UGA. They're longtime friends of ours here at DawgNation Daily, so it's always fun to do business with those that support us and those that support UGA, and that is what Engineered Solutions of Georgia has been doing for a long time. You can also reach out and get in touch with them very easily. Simply give them a call, 678-ESOG now. That's 678-ESOG now. That'll get you in touch with Engineered Solutions of Georgia. All right, so a couple of things going on here. As I told you before, it's Connor Riley coming up in just a moment. Really looking forward to that. Also a chance to talk to former Georgia running back Keith Marshall later on today there as well. Always a great chance to hear from a former Dog on what he thinks of the current Dogs. That's always valuable to us, and we do that a lot around here. But Keith's also doing some great work with the Players Lounge right now, which is a really cool organization that's, I think, been really creative in terms of how it's creating NIL opportunities for players, but also creating access for fans to get in touch with the players that they obviously enjoy cheering for. And Keith's going to tell us about some special events coming up around G-Day that involve that, and we're going to make our own special announcement in regards to that ourselves today on the show here too. So it's very busy for us. There's a lot of news announcement type things on the show today, so we're going to kind of get into all of that for you. But before we do any of that, it's Connor Riley coming up in just a moment. And as a lead into Connor, let me go around the doghouse here for a moment there as well, because I got to explain something to you just for a minute. So today we are live doing the show as we always do. However, we have a little bit of a scheduling issue for the rest of the week. Our typical producers, they're taking some vacation time, which I'm excited for them to be able to do. But because of that, we're going to need to step away ourselves. And that means we're pre-recording for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The truth is, this kind of works out okay for me because my kids are on spring break. So getting a chance to spend a little time with them is always a good thing. I don't like being away from the show. But we're going to still have really good shows for you. The one thing that's going to be a little bit different is that we won't get to react to some of the stuff that comes out of UGA over the course of the next couple of days until Monday. So I want to give you a little bit of a homework assignment because this will be kind of my last time to speak to you live, until Monday. We'll have pre-recorded shows Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But I want you to listen in closely to something that Kirby Smart says later on this evening. You'll be able to see this in the DawgNation YouTube page when it comes out. One of the things we talked about yesterday is that if there was a quarterback, whether it's Brock Vandegrift or Carson Beck, who is on the verge of making a big push to truly compete for some playing time and take away some game reps away from the presumed starter Stetson Bennett, who led Georgia to a national championship last season, that Smart likely would not keep that a secret. That if you want to go back and if you'll listen to yesterday's show, I gave you some precedent for this. Some of the stuff that Smart was saying about Jake Fromm when Fromm first arrived at UGA, acknowledging that he was more ready than the typical freshman is, acknowledging that he was pushing Jacob Eason, that he was competing for playing time. Smart gave voice to all of that, and we gave you examples of that yesterday. And so when Eason got hurt and Fromm stepped in, a lot of Georgia fans already had confidence in Jake there on that. And when Eason returned to health, but Fromm remained starting quarterback, we're left to assume that part of the reason that happened is that Smart as recently as the spring and summer of that year, was a believer in Jake's ability to perform in the job if he were to be called upon. So if you want to fast forward now to 2022, what that means is that if a Stetson Bennett were to cede some ground to a Carson Beck or a Brock Vandagriff, there will probably be some things that Kirby Smart says that foreshadows the possibility of that happening. He will speak to either Beck or Vandagriff pushing Stetson Bennett. And to give you a little context of what we might hear from Kirby the rest of the spring, let me go back to last Thursday for a moment. Smart talking about Carson Beck, obviously very complimentary, but not quite the same vein, I would say, of what he said about previous quarterbacks in the past. Let me let you hear it, then I'll explain why after this. This is Kirby from last week.
Well, I think he has really good composure. Carson's never up, never down. I think that's a great quality on a quarterback. I've seen, guys that are emotional and up and down like a roller coaster. He's pretty even keel. And to be honest, most of our quarterbacks are. There's no guy out there that loses it one way or the other, but he does a good job being very even keeled, and I think he understands the system. He's another year in the system, so it comes natural to him. He's not nervous about what the huddle call is, what's my read, what's the motion, what's the shift. He's very cool, calm, and collected, and does a good job of managing those things with the offense. So I think he's earned some confidence and earned some confidence with the players.
So that's very complimentary from Smart. It sounds like Carson Beck is legitimately having a very good spring, and Smart says some really good things about him. However, if you want to kind of dive a little deeper into that, here's what I hear. I hear Smart speaking complimentary of Beck in comparison to the older version of Beck from a year ago, or maybe when he first arrived at UGA. I hear, in other words, Smart talking about Beck's growth. What you don't quite hear there yet, and you haven't really heard this from Vandagriff yet either, but maybe you will, is speaking with these quarterbacks in comparison to other guys in that room. When Smart spoke about Fromm in 2017, more than happy to compare him to Jacob Eason, saying he's pushing Eason. He's competing with Eason. He's making a move on him. He's coming up, from behind him or whatever it was in the clip that we played for you yesterday. Smart, saying those types of things. So listen closely on that. If the subject of Beck comes up again today, or if it comes up with Vandagriff or whatever else, listen for that kind of thing. Not just are Beck and Vandagriff getting better compared to the version of themselves that was, present around this program a year ago, or in Beck's case 2 years ago, but in comparison to what's currently going on. In other words, if we are on the verge of an unorthodox thing happening, some sort of sea change where a quarterback is going to step in and actually get himself some playing time come the fall, Smart likely won't keep that a secret, because in the past, that is not what he's done. So that is Around the Doghouse here for you on the program here today. As I said before, it's Keith Marshall later on, former Georgia running back. Always cool to have him. And in addition to an announcement I'm going to make with Keith, I'm also going to tell you one more time before we're done today about a really cool event we've got going on a couple of weeks from now there as well. Next week, I should say, that's going to be really fun too. So this is a busy, busy day filled with really fun announcements of some really cool stuff that DawgNation's got going on over the course of the next few days. Man, what an exciting time. Can't wait to tell you all about that. But before that, we've got some business to do. Spring practice ongoing, guys competing for playing time, guys trying to step up, trying to get a handle on what this 2022 team is going to look like. Let's cover all those bases right now. It's a Kroger Fresh Take. Let's speak to Connor Riley here on DawgNation Daily.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Kroger Fresh Take, Connor Riley here on our program. Always great to have him. And Connor pinch hit for us a little bit yesterday. John Stinchcomb was on vacation, so we did a bunch of quarterback stuff with him yesterday. Even though I was just discussing quarterbacks, I'm actually going to change the subject and kind of get into something else with Connor here for a moment. Connor, you heard me make a little bit of a briefcase off the top of the show there about a Jalen Carter or a Brock Bowers Heisman candidacy. In kind of typical years, it would have seemed impossible for a defensive lineman or a tight end to get in the Heisman discussion. But I don't know that we're in typical times anymore. We had a defensive player become a finalist a year ago, and we had a wide receiver win the award a couple of years before that. I truly believe that the Brock Bowers numbers are good enough. I absolutely believe he could at least get Heisman consideration. If Jalen Carter were to have a great individual season a year after the Georgia defense became even more famous by reputation because of how well it played, I think that Jalen Carter could be maybe more in line for something like that this year than maybe Jordan Davis proved to be a year ago. I'm not quite ready to tout one of these two guys for the award or, start, waving a big flag of candidacy here. But it's not impossible, I don't believe.
I'm going to lean it kind of is, at least for Jalen Carter. I actually maybe do see a world where Brock Bowers, if you told me he finishes with 1,200 yards, 14 touchdown catches, and is clearly the best offensive player on this Georgia team, maybe I can see a world where that when Georgia's in the college football playoff, I could see him finishing as a Heisman finalist. I don't necessarily know about winning the entire award because I think Bryce Young and CJ Stroud are going to put up very stupid numbers. But at the same point in time, I think back to last year, Will Anderson wasn't even a Heisman finalist, and he led the nation in sacks and tackles for loss and was as dominant a defensive player as I think I can remember in recent memory. Now you can say that Aiden Hutchinson maybe ate into his voting share a little bit there, but I still think from a wider Heisman standpoint, we're still very much focused. And I say we, the college football media that doesn't really seem to pay attention to who the actual best players are, but just looks at who's putting up monster stats. That's how you see a guy like CJ Stroud become a Heisman finalist, even though I think anyone who actually watched them play last season, not to discredit what Stroud did, I don't know how you saw what Will Anderson did and say, oh yeah, CJ Stroud is more deserving of a Heisman vote than Will Anderson.
Suffer from the fact that his quarterback was on the way to winning the award. That was probably a classic example of truly just splitting the votes, correct?
That's kind of I could factor that in as well, yeah.
So I think you're right about Brock Bowers in that his Heisman candidacy, to the extent that it could exist, is almost all numbers based. That if Georgia's once again a title contender, and if Brock Bowers has an even better statistical season this year than he had a year ago, that he could propel himself in that conversation by just being Georgia's most prolific player. And I really don't foresee a situation, barring injury, where that once again isn't true. Georgia may be better with the running game. They may be slightly deeper at the wide receiver position than this year they were a year ago, just because some of those guys are a year older. But I do expect Bowers to still have the best numbers, and if the numbers are even better than they were, then that becomes his case, the fact that he's just putting up big numbers for a team that's on its way to maybe competing for a national championship again. I guess I would, though, suggest that the Georgia defense got so much attention a year ago, and I kind of jokingly said a moment ago that Jordan Davis walked so that Jalen Carter could run. Like, doesn't Carter benefit from that steam maybe a little bit? He would have to have big numbers, and as you said before, big numbers aren't always a guarantee because Anderson did have those. It wasn't rewarded for that. But, I mean, to me, if Hutchinson could do it, then why not Jalen Carter?
Well, I mean, do you think that the Georgia defense is going to take a step back this year and not be statistically dominant as it was a season ago?
I would say the answer to that question is probably yes, but in the midst of this conversation, I'm not quite so sure it matters quite so much because Georgia is kind of known as the defensive team. People kind of whittle things down to like a gimmick or a shtick, and Georgia's shtick is the defensive shtick. So there are a lot of people that if you're just looking for some sort of, Heisman, if you're looking to sort of have the conversation, it's almost like you could more easily do this for a Georgia player than you could for other programs just simply because Georgia's just kind of more known for defense. Even if the defense isn't quite as good, I'm not quite so sure the voters will quite know that, just simply because this is what Georgia's sort of known for now.
Yeah, I still tend to think that because this Georgia defense is going to take a step back this year, that's actually probably going to hurt Carter's candidacy unless this defense is somehow, 90 to 95% as good as it was a season ago. And I'll point out with Carter, he's going to have to get to double-digit sacks, something I don't think we've seen a player do from Kirby Smart, much less a defensive lineman. And so unless he is a true game wrecker, because again, as great as numbers are, I can go back to Will Anderson a season ago who would have had my vote for the Heisman Trophy. I thought he was the best player in the country last season, and he could not even get an invite to New York. So I do still think that even if you are a dominant player on a dominant defense, I could also point out Nakobe Dean a season ago didn't get a whole lot of Heisman love, but that again might be more towards splitting the vote. I'm going to find it hard to believe that a player like Jalen Carter, especially with how heavy Georgia rotates on the defensive line and how little snaps he might actually end up playing, are probably going to eat into his Heisman candidacy.
So let me talk about that separate from the Heisman for a moment. Given who Carter we believe is as a player, given how the makeup of this year's team is a little bit different than it was a year ago, this is still a very deep team, but it's not like shockingly, cartoonishly deep, maybe the way that it was last year. Do you think that somehow, some way, Trey Scott, Kirby Smart treat Jalen Carter a little differently this year? Do they put him more in a starring type role just because he does, at least in the eyes of, someone like me who's not a scout, not a coach, he probably does stand head and shoulders above the other guys in this group a little bit more so this year. Do you think that leads to a little different treatment of him by the coaching staff? And does that lead to a higher threshold of statistical potential because he's just kind of in more of a starring role than the typical Georgia defensive guy has been?
No, I'd be surprised by that. And even given that I do agree with you that he is a little bit of a different sort of defensive lineman that Georgia has had in years past, I think with what we've seen from Kirby Smart in the way he wants to run his defenses, he wants to run it to where the linebackers are the one making the plays more often than not. You've seen Nakobe Dean 6 sacks a season ago. And so because of that, even as dominant as I think Jalen Carter can potentially be, I still think they want to gear this success towards these linebackers, guys like Jamon Dumas-Johnson, Shmuel Munden, Tresvant Marshall, provided they're healthy, being the guys that are the ones that are making the plays more often than not, and not essentially relying on Jalen Carter to just try and win one-on-one or one-on-two matchups.
Do one more thing on this, and maybe this is wish casting on my part, but I at least want to have this conversation for a moment. So you mentioned Bryce Young a moment ago, kind of up there near the very top. He obviously won the award a year ago. He may be the favorite to win the Heisman again for this upcoming season. Certainly CJ Stroud's in that conversation there as well. But let me focus on Bryce here for a moment. And I am obviously very well aware just because something hasn't happened doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It doesn't guarantee anything. But Bryce does have a couple of interesting things going against him this year. Haven't had a back-to-back winner since Archie Griffith like a million years ago. That's only happened one time. Typically speaking, when you think about Heisman Trophy picks, the preseason favorites don't typically fare very well when it comes to actually winning the award. I mean, are we sure that you can rubber stamp Bryce Young for this upcoming season to have the same kind of season he had a year ago? Because history would suggest, maybe not quite, so much always there on that. And I don't know who that opens the door for. Maybe it opens the door for CJ Stroud even more or something along those lines. But it's interesting to note that a replica of what Young did a year ago is going to go against a couple of pretty significant trends. Guys who've won the trophy coming back trying to win it again, and guys who start the year as kind of one of those odds-on favorite to win the award. It hasn't always worked out for those guys in the past.
Yeah, statistically based, I think Bryce Young's going to have a better season. I think he's going to make improvements working with Bill O'Brien for another year. You've seen that kind of continuity in how when Alabama has been able to have that on the offensive side of the ball, what that means going forward. Having said all that, I think because of the narrative around him, the fact that he's essentially going to have to be God back there disguised as Bryce Young playing quarterback, I think is going to make it difficult for a guy like Young. And I would even maybe say CJ Stroud as well. Like unless those two guys are perfect week in, week out, like we saw Joe Burrow back in 2019. And even with Burrow, he sort of came out of nowhere. And I think coming out of nowhere sort of plays into your benefactor here. The national media didn't exactly know who Bryce Young was a season ago. And then he comes in and shows how great he is right away. I think that template is much more replicable for Heisman Trophy success than, as you point out, you had a great season the year before. In Young's case, you win it. In Stroud's case, you were a Heisman finalist. That is a much harder recipe for success to follow. I'd probably say the last guy that was an early preseason favorite to win the award was probably Marcus Mariota back in 2014. So it is a tough road to hoe for those guys.
Let me change the subject more Georgia fully here for a moment. And I've said this now a couple of times. I think folks should go out of their way to look at the video that Georgia put out of the scrimmage on Saturday. I thought it was actually pretty entertaining, longer cuts than you sometimes get in some of those. A lot of times those ends up being kind of like sort of snappy jump cutty type stuff, where it's almost like a Marvel movie trailer. It's sort of hard to tell what's going on. But they gave you a little longer clips on some of this kind of stuff. And I saw good moments for Kenny McIntosh. I saw good moments from Kendall Milton. I also enjoyed Kendall Milton's press conference the other day when he spoke to reporters. I'm pretty bullish right now on the Georgia running back position for the upcoming year. And when I look at those areas in which Georgia can be better this year than a year ago, I just kind of continue to gravitate towards running back, as I don't know this group leads the SEC in rushing the way that it did in 2017, 2018, but moving back in that direction before you even get to the contribution of a guy like Dejon Edwards or incoming freshman like Branson Robinson, I think this is going to be a better version of the Georgia running game, coupled with a better offensive line than maybe we've seen in either of the last 2 years.
I don't know if it's the running backs that I would necessarily put it on. I was always a big believer in Zamir White's talent, and as nice of a player as I think Kenny McIntosh is, James Cook is a better athlete and I think a more natural pass catcher. And so, expecting them to be better from a talent standpoint, I don't think it's fair. I think if Georgia does have a more productive running game this year, it falls on the shoulders of the offensive line, in particular because they probably have a more physical, bigger offensive line. If you're starting 5 offensive line is Broderick Jones, Xavier Truss, Cedric Von Pron, Tate Ratledge, and Warren McClendon, that's just a beefier offensive line in general than what you had a season ago when you're playing Warren Erickson a lot, you're playing Justin Schaefer at guard, you're playing Jamari Sawyer at tackle there. That is just not the same level of beef and the same level of physicality on the offensive line there. So if Georgia does have a more productive running season this year, I think it's going to be more so because of the offensive line and the improvements made there than necessarily, Kenny McIntosh and Kendall Milton are more talented or have a higher upside than, say, Zamir White and James Cook.
I don't think there was anything wrong with the Cook talent. I don't think there was anything wrong with the Zamir White talent. I think they were just fine. I think, though, you're going to see the impact of year 3 of the Todd Monken system on the running game right now, where all of a sudden you start to see the full fruits of what it means to have a defense in conflict, what it means when you really don't know what Georgia's going to do in any given moment. When you are forced to defend against the possibility of everything, that's where you see the running game, I think, fully come into full form. Obviously, that wasn't true in 2019, the first year, or I should say the last year prior to the Todd Monken arrival. And in 2020, it was probably still not quite so true either. Last year, you started seeing some examples of that. When you compare a really potent rushing attack with a passing attack that now forces defenses to make a choice, I just think you're going to have the potential of seeing an even better version of the system that both Cook and White had some success in a year ago. I just think the entirety of the offense is likely to take another step forward in year 3. If I had to make my assumption, that's what my assumption probably would be.
Well, to that same point, I think a lot of that is going to depend on the health of this wide receiver room, because if this wide receiver room suffers the same sorts of injuries that it did a season ago and you're limited from a depth standpoint there, I do think it makes it easier to defend this rushing attack and what they might be able to do going forward. So, while yes, I like, this isn't to discredit Kendall Milton or Kenny McIntosh. I like the talent there. Kendall Milton has really slimmed down, and as long as he can stay healthy, I still think there's a lot of talent there with him. But I think with this Georgia running attack and where it is and what we've seen from the past couple of seasons, it's not necessarily dependent on the running backs, because I believe Georgia has pretty much, for the entirety of Kirby Smart's time at Georgia, always had really talented running backs. I think the success of Georgia's offense and Georgia's running game in particular is going to be predicated on how well the offensive line blocks and how healthy this wide receiver position is able to be. That way that they can, as you point out, have a force defenses to be in conflict to where they don't feel comfortable just manning up on younger wide receivers on the outside.
I'm going to ask you one more question about the offensive line here in a moment to wrap things up. Let me remind folks first, though, this is our Kroger Fresh Take with Connor Riley, and Kroger's helping step up right now for something we all need. More savings at the pump. Never been as expensive as it is right now, at least seemingly, to fill up our vehicles, and that's where Kroger steps in to help you, because when you spend money in store, you're going to earn those fuel points for Kroger. You're going to earn a fuel point for every dollar you spend, and you're going to have chances at twice the fuel points as well when you purchase gift cards and also during special weekends throughout the year there as well. So stop by in store to find out more about this, or check out Kroger.com and find out how you can take full advantage of those great Kroger fuel point savings taking place at your local Kroger. All right, Connor, very quickly here to kind of wrap this up. Maybe another example of something we just see happen at Georgia quite a lot, and it's just always kind of cool when it does. And one of these days, maybe I'll see this coming before it happens. But when it comes to the offensive line, I've been talking about, hey, you got to get Tate Ratledge back healthy. You got to get Amarius Mims, maybe moving him over to guard spot. You got to get your best 5 on the field, and maybe one day that does end up being Georgia's best 5. I guess we still got a long way to go before the season begins. But there's an obvious theme to that. A Ratledge elite recruit. Let's get him back healthy again if you're Georgia. Mims, former elite recruit. You got to find a place where he can go out there and play. And yet, quietly, sometimes it's the not-so-heralded recruits who end up kind of making themselves a part of this conversation. Devon Willex seems to be one of those guys that, once again, I didn't really give a whole lot of thought to when he signed at Georgia. The same way I didn't when Adonai Mitchell signed at Georgia, and other names you might mention there. And it just seems like one way or another, Willick is a part of the conversation about what's going on right now, and another example of Georgia just kind of either knowing what it's looking for or knowing how to find guys. For a program that's made so much of its reputation around the elite recruits that it's brought into the program, some of the guys who are of a lesser stripe from a recruiting standpoint but very good on the field, that's a part of this thing too. And it seems like Willick is trying to make his case for maybe being one of those guys there as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people want to see Amarius Mims play because just related back to his 5-star recruiting ranking. But we asked Kirby Smart last week, how is the situation sort of shaping up at guard? And he went through 5 names at the position And Amarius Mims was not one of them. And I think that's very telling in terms of where they expect him to be and where they expect him to play. And with Broderick Jones and Warren McClendon in front of him, I think it's going to be tough for Amarius Mims to get on the field. And for all the hand-wringing that might come for that, Warren McClendon is going to be a 3-year starter at right tackle in the SEC and probably a preseason All-SEC player at that offensive tackle spot. Broderick Jones was every bit as good of a recruit as Amarius Mims was and made real strides last season, and I think is very deserving of that left tackle spot he stands to take over there. So, in trying to see where you get him on the field. And I'll say this for Tate Ratledge, while he had as good a camp as any last year, and if he doesn't break his foot, I think he's absolutely penciled in and probably written in pen as a starter right now. Big guys with lower leg injuries. I talked with John Stinchcomb about this one time. When you have a bone break in the lower part of your body where you're not as comfortable, you're not as confident pushing off there, it does take a little while to get over that. And Tate Ratledge is going to have to prove that, A, that he can stay healthy, but B, get back to the player that he was a season ago, because I think at the guard position with Xavier Truss, Devon Willex, Warren Erickson, you have veteran guys there in Truss and Willex. You have guys who are similar body size and bring, I think, a level of physicality that Tate does as well there. So this idea that Tate Ratledge is just going to simply walk into a starting spot because of his recruiting ranking and how he played pre-broken foot, I think is a little bit of a misnomer there. And I expect this guard competition to go well even into the season potentially. And Georgia's going to be able to try and move around different combinations, whether it be Truss and Willex at the two guards to give them two really monsters there in the middle, or whether Micah Morris or Dylan Fairchild, who Kirby Smart also sort of took some time to praise, how they continue to develop there. So, I understand why people want to see Amarius Mims and Tate Ratledge potentially be your two offensive guards, but quite frankly, I'd be pretty surprised if, and I'm going to try and walk this back before I get too out in front of my skis here. I think this competition at guard, you have to trust the coaching staff here. You can't just look at pure recruiting rankings or pure recruiting numbers, because we've seen time and time again with this position. Solomon Kinley was a multi-year starter at guard. Justin Schaefer was a multi-year starter at guard. Neither of those guys were highly touted recruits, but they were key pieces on strong offensive lines. And it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest to see either a Xavier Truss or Devon Willex develop into the same thing.
Connor, great stuff. Thank you for being here as part of our Kroger Fresh Take here today. We'll look forward to reading a lot more from you at DawgNation.com and chat with you again very soon on the program there as well.
Yep, as always, was a pleasure.
This is SEC Through.
All right, really fun to get a chance to talk to Connor there about a couple of interesting topics. Connor's also on the show on Monday, so we did some other stuff with him then. So we've had a lot of Connor Riley this week, and that's never a bad thing. We have another special guest coming up in a couple of minutes there as well. We're going to talk to former Georgia running back Keith Marshall about the Dogs, also about the work that he's doing with an organization called the Players Lounge, which some of you are very well acquainted with, and they've got some big events coming up, and Keith will tell us about all of that here coming up in just a bit. Before that, though, let's go cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean, and the time is almost here. The Dogs are going to be doing G-Day, and then after that, we're going to be getting settled in to head on the high seas ourselves. The very first ever cruise with DawgNation on board Independence of the Seas, going to Nassau in the Bahamas, going to Perfect Day Coco Cay. It is going to be a wonderful experience, and maybe still a little bit of time. It's last minute now, I have to admit, but maybe a little bit of time for you to be on board. Maybe if nothing else, you'll just kind of live vicariously through us. You'll get ready to enjoy that. But DawgNation.com or DawgNationCruise.com if you want to find out a little more details about it. We're going to be having a great time enjoying all that is to be enjoyed with a Royal Caribbean cruise. Man, I cannot wait for this. It's going to be so much fun. I really am looking forward to just kind of kicking back, relaxing, looking back on spring practice, enjoying the NFL draft. That's going to be happening while we're on the ship. Going to be a really good time. Jeff's going to be there. Mike Griffith's going to be there. I'm going to be there. We are going to have a really good time with all of that. Before I get Keith Marshall, let me give you a couple of SEC stories here today as well. And I want to begin with this. I enjoyed the game last night. Kansas, North Carolina, I thought it was thrilling. I don't know how much of this is just, we haven't had like real college basketball in the last couple of years, no tournament at all in 2020. Last year, kind of a fanless event. Man, it just really felt like this was a reminder of what I've always loved about college basketball. Rolling now into the Masters here this week. Obviously, a lot of excitement about that. Major League Baseball opening day. By the way, more news on big Dog Nation, some fun with Dog Nation, the Braves coming up. We'll tell you about that before the show's done here today. But in a lot of ways, this just sort of feels like one of the best sports weeks of the year, right? It involves very little of college football, but man, for those of us who love college football, what a great time to enjoy a few other sports like college basketball, like the Masters, like Major League Baseball. Just a really fun time to be doing all of that, and I hope you're having as much fun with it this week as I am. Some of you are lucky enough to be going to Augusta, which is really cool. I wish I was you, but whatever you're doing, watching on TV or being there on the grounds or whatever else, just a a fun time to be enjoying sports right now. And I know a lot of folks excited about the return of Major League Baseball coming up in a few days there as well. Something else we have our eye on, in addition to those other sports, is what's going on with college football recruiting. And I don't know if you're noticing this the way that I am, but it's very interesting to me how the story of Arch Manning's recruitment's being covered at the moment. Manning just took another visit this past weekend. He goes to Alabama after having been at Texas before that, and as you know, Georgia before that. And isn't it funny that if you follow some of the online stuff related to this, it seems like that each one of these visits is bringing about kind of a sharp turn in terms of how the Manning recruitment's being covered. He goes to Texas. Texas has locked this down. And folks were like, making their online predictions. Manning's going to Texas. Manning's going to Texas. And then he visits Alabama, and suddenly there's this new flood of predictions. No, he's not going to Texas. He's going to Alabama. Manning to Alabama. And, some of the websites that chronicle these predictions, you see, Alabama now has taken the lead. And we kind of predicted this, that Manning, because of his famous last name, was going to bring more mainstream attention into the recruiting story. And because there's more mainstream attention on this, the way in which the story gets covered would probably be a little bit different. I think for those of us who kind of follow this on a more regular basis, I think we know that things typically don't change quite so much on the basis of just one unofficial visit. Now, it's probably true that Manning may not take very many official visits. He may, has been reported in some places, that he may only take the official visit to the school that he ultimately commits to. But in terms of this being this wild roller coaster of when he's at Georgia, man, Georgia's the place he's going to be. And when he's at Texas, man, that's the place he's going to be. And then when he's at Alabama, no, it's actually Alabama. That's the place that he's ultimately going to go. I think that's more reflective of how the story's being covered than the actual facts with the story. If you get my drift on that, I think for now it's too early to know where Arch is going to end up. I do think the three schools I just mentioned are probably heavily involved in it. Maybe the Alabama visit did make them even more of a player than they were before. But I think this is being portrayed as a wild series of twists and turns. I'm not quite so sure that accurately reflects the way in which a football-savvy family like the Mannings is probably going about this. One of the schools that's also been believed to be connected to Manning, at least eventually getting a deeper connection, is going to be LSU. And I saw an interesting quote from Brian Kelly that I wanted to share with you. And I'll admit this is probably a little bit unfair, but it kind of plays into type for what I think about Kelly a bit. He was asked about how the evolution is going with the LSU players and coaches and how they're getting comfortable with him. And he says, I think what they've done more than anything else is embraced my philosophy, he says. That was part of the hiring process. We got a lot of coaches that are familiar with what I've done. And so that's been, from a leadership standpoint, I think been easier because the coaches have had a sense of familiarity. And listen, this is totally unfair, and I'm projecting something into Kelly that may not be there. But when you think about Kelly, you do think about ego a little bit, right? And it's important to remember that the last three coaches at LSU prior to him have all won national championships, that it's not about what Kelly can do, it's about what the program itself can do. For instance, take a guy like Gallagher Orgeron, who I don't think people think of as necessarily a great coach, but did have great success, won a national title in 2019. And I think if you look at the Orgeron personality, I don't know that he thought he was great, but I do think he believed LSU was great. And he leaned into that, his love for the program, to help win the title. Obviously, most coaches at LSU typically do well. But if Kelly comes in here with kind of a me-first ego, that could set him back. And that could be his own barrier to the kind of success that previous LSU coaches have kind of enjoyed. Maybe a little unfair to read too much into a clip and a quote. I'll certainly acknowledge that. But how Kelly is going to fit in at LSU, I do think remains one of the most interesting storylines for the upcoming season. We'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And now, here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, we'll get ready to welcome in a great former Georgia running back and a terrific figure in the program's history, and now a guy who's doing some really cool things with our friends at the Players Lounge as well. It is Keith Marshall here on our program today. Keith, thank you so much for spending time with us here today. Certainly appreciate that and hope you're doing well.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm doing great this morning. I want to appreciate, you guys for having me on.
So the Players Lounge got some really fun things going on as we head towards GA Day and has had some really cool things going on now for quite some time. I want to find out more about that here in a moment. We talked to Aaron Murray about some of that last week there as well. But before we get into that, Keith, I do have to find out from you. You saw the Dogs hoist that national championship trophy last season. It's been a long time coming. A lot of players who came through this program know how hard this program has worked to be in the position to win that national title, and now it has finally happened. As a former player turned fan of this program, how good did it feel for you to see UGA bring it home this past season?
It was amazing, man. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's been a long time coming. I think me and a lot of the boys that I came through with, obviously we had a moderate amount of success and we felt like we were close at times. So This championship in a way felt like we won. As I said, we've been so close for so long. We've had the talent. We've had so many heartbreaks, particularly to Alabama. So to finally, bridge that gap and to do it by beating Alabama, who beat us in the SEC championship, kind of as an underdog, and to come back in the national championship and get it done. It was really an amazing event, man. I'm excited for the program and what it means for us. And now to see if we can carry that forward and really develop into what I believe to be, we have the ability to be a mainstay in college football. And so I'm excited to see that happen.
And obviously carrying success forward means making sense about the current landscape of the sport. And one of the big new things on the horizon for Georgia and everybody else, name, image, likeness opportunities for players and fans who want to take advantage of some of that stuff as well and help support the players they love, maybe even get more access to those players through all of that there as well. And an organization that you work with is a big part of that there as well with the Players Lounge. And I think this is really cool because, as I said before, for a lot of players on the Georgia roster and across college football there as well, they're getting a chance to make some money through their connection with the Players Lounge. And for a lot of fans themselves, they're getting a chance to interact with some of these players online or in some cases in person there as well and create those opportunities there too. Keith, from your perspective, what's it been like working with the Players Lounge? And for folks who are still kind of trying to make sense of how an organization, a company like this, steps up to serve both fans and players right now, what can you tell our audience to help them kind of understand the mission of the Players Lounge a little bit better?
Absolutely. So I guess to back up a little bit, when I was in college, obviously we didn't have the opportunity to get paid, and I was on a few of the different boards that were pushing forward different initiatives to get college athletes access to more benefits, such as, increased stipends so you can go out and enjoy yourself and things like that. And I think we've all heard stories of guys that, had families back at home that needed the support, or, contrarily, we've heard stories of guys that were big time college athletes and then got hurt and never had a chance to cash in on the success that they were able to accomplish on the field. So the fact that I was a part of those conversations back when I was in college, and now I'm in a position where I co-founded a company that's really, it's really, I would say we're a pioneer in defining what this new landscape is going to look like. As you mentioned, our model is basically taking the legacy model of fan and player engagement where they go through a third-party media house, and now it's like, okay, these kids can get paid. The fans want inside access anyway, so we just want to have a platform that allows fans and athletes to communicate in a way that allows these athletes ways to monetize and develop their brands in a way that's authentic to them. And so, again, to be at the forefront of that movement has really, really been awesome. We got a great team of guys. We've had a moderate amount of success so far. Obviously, we had to start at Georgia, being home base, being where we all come from and love so much, and we're excited to kind of expand this thing outwards.
I think one of the cool things about learning more about this is, as you said, it's not just a chance for players to make some money, which is something that, as a former player, I know is near and dear to your heart, but for fans who always want that deeper connection or to feel a little closer to the product, the access granted to fans throughout all of this and the NFT tokens, for instance, that the Players Lounge has sold, and the access that kind of comes along with that's been one of the cool things for me, is to see how some of the work that you guys have done here has opened the door for fans to get a little closer connection to the players they enjoy cheering for.
Absolutely. So, to start us off, in our message board on Discord, which, everybody listening, you should go join. We have a bunch of former players and current players who are in there on a daily basis communicating with these fans that follow the program ever so closely. And then obviously on the fan side, when you purchase the NFT, NFT is a bit of a cryptic term. A lot of people don't totally understand what it means, sure. But, the way that we have marketed that is just to explain it as it's a ticket or it's your subscription to join the community. And when you do so, first and foremost, you get direct and immediate access to the players. You get access to content that's going to be curated and produced and only be available to people within that community. Then you get access to some of the real live events, which we are launching next weekend at G-Day. So we're super excited about that. We have a tailgate the morning of G-Day. That's going to be awesome. We're expecting a lot of the DGD Mafia to come out. We're expecting a lot of our former players to come out. We have the golf tournament the day before, which is going to be an awesome opportunity. We're going to support some local nonprofits there. And then we're going to take it Friday night, and we're going to hit Silver Dollar, which is one of everybody's favorite hangout spots if you went to school in Athens. Yeah. So we're super excited about everything that we're doing.
All right, I want to find out more about the big G-Day weekend coming up before we let you go. Let me squeeze in one more thing before we get there, though. We said before, your position, obviously running back, and you know what it means to be, the challenge of playing the SEC and what that's all about. And so when you look at this group of running backs for Georgia here this year, we were actually talking about this before you joined us, a chance for Kendall Milton to have a little bit more of a spotlight on him this year. Kenny McIntosh to continue some of the things that he's shown in a Georgia uniform. There are guys like Dejon Edwards who've been waiting in the wings for bigger opportunity. Freshman players like Branson Robinson kind of stepping into what could be a pretty interesting role. When you look at what Georgia kind of has at running back for the upcoming season, what do you see from this group and the kind of potential they might have to really help get Georgia where it wants to go here in 2022?
Well, I mean, everybody knows, Georgia's known for having dominant running backs. That's kind of one of our things that we push out. And so I think we certainly have the talent in the room. Super excited to see what Milton's going to be able to do. When you look at him from just a, physical capability, he has everything that you want in a running back. He's big, fast, strong, runs through tackles, has good balance. So super excited for him to get in a position where he can showcase a little bit of that, get more touches. And then a guy that I think has been extremely underrated, I think he kind of fills that niche of the third down, do it all. You can put him out wide, is Kenny McIntosh. I mean, he's smooth as butter. He's probably the most natural runner I've seen in Georgia in a while. And that's saying a lot because we've got a lot of really good running backs. And so I think those two guys have an opportunity to really establish themselves and make a name for themselves. And then obviously you mentioned some of the other guys that are waiting in the rings. I'm super excited to see what Robinson is going to do. He got a lot of high praise, high comparison. Some names, I'm not going to put that on him at this age, but I'm really excited to see what he's going to bring to the table.
Keith, I think that's a terrific analysis. Let me remind folks, as we said before, going into the G-Day weekend, you got the big event on Friday, you got the golf tournament, the event at Silver Dollar, and some really cool stuff coming up on Saturday there as well at Creature Comforts. Remind folks again, all the fun stuff going on there when it comes to the G-Day weekend. Give us a little bit of a reminder about all the great stuff the Players Lounge has going on.
Absolutely. So the people that purchased our DGD Mafia NFTs, they get access to these events. And the first event will be on Friday night. We're going to have a golf tournament where we're having, holders play with former players. So that'll be an awesome opportunity for fans to get to interact with some of the players past. Then that night, we're going to go to Silver Dollar. We're going to have a hangout there. And that's really targeted at, anybody that wants to come that's in town. But obviously, Greek life and the students that are super supportive of the program and are excited about the Players Lounge. And then we'll move into Saturday morning, which we'll have the tailgate at Creature Comforts, which is open to everybody. Obviously, we'll have some special perks that go to the DGD Mafia. And we're expecting to have a lot of former players there as well. So we're really excited about it. If you're looking for more information and figuring out how you can get involved, you can hit us up on our website. It is theplayerlounge.io. Or you can follow us on our socials, which is just TH Players Lounge or the DGD Mafia. And so if you want more information on those events and figure out how you can attend, check us out there.
Keith, I'm also happy to announce that DawgNation going to be broadcasting live from the Creature Comforts event there on Saturday prior to G-Day. So for the folks who can't be in Athens to see it in person, we're going to bring a taste of the Players Lounge to the folks on our own channels there that day, getting a chance to speak to some of the great former Georgia Dogs in the room there live from Creature Comforts on Saturday. That's a place that we love anyway. And, of course, G-Day, a great time to be in Athens. And so DawgNation going to be broadcasting a video live with the Players Lounge before G-Day on that particular Saturday. So, Keith, on behalf of everybody at DawgNation, I can't tell you how excited we are to be a part of some of the cool things that y'all are going to be doing there that weekend.
Absolutely, man. And we appreciate your support and the support from the greater Georgia community so far. I think we couldn't have done this project, pulled it off without the support of organizations such as you guys. And, we're really thankful for that and looking forward to making sure that we deliver on kind of the value proposition that we've publicly, marketed. So,
well, Keith, I'll tell you this. We love to see former Dogs go on to do great things, and that's obviously what you're doing right now. So congratulations on your success, continued success there as well. I'm looking forward to seeing you on G-Day weekend, and as you said, I'll invite folks to check it out on social at TH Players Lounge on social media or theplayerlounge.io. That's the website, theplayerlounge.io. Find out more about the cool things that are going on both for G-Day weekend and everything else there as well. Thanks for your time, and we'll look forward to getting a chance to speak to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. And as always, go Dogs, man.
Yes, sir. Good stuff there from Keith Marshall. So to give you an idea about this, we are going to be live there that day. We'll do Kroger kickoff on Saturday of G-Day. That's April 16th from Creature Comforts facility. Their great facility there in downtown, hanging out with Keith Marshall. Champ Bailey's going to be there. A lot of former Dogs going to be on hand there at the Creature Comforts event on that Saturday. So I'm really excited about being able to do all of that leading into G-Day. And I love to see a guy like Keith Marshall having the success that he's having. We had Aaron Murray on last week on the same topic, doing great things there as well. It's a very cool thing to be able to see, and congratulations to them, and looking forward to being a part of that with Dog Nation here coming up in just a little bit there as well. Also, while on the subject of making big announcements, I told you this was kind of a big day of all that kind of stuff. Don't forget something else that's going to be happening next week there as well, leading into G-Day week. As we said before, it's also the start of the Major League Baseball season. That means some really big stuff going on with the Atlanta Braves there as well. Now, April 7th through the 13th is going to be a great week for the Braves. They're kind of celebrating what they're calling Champions Week, which obviously for the Braves, World Series champions, getting back there on the field, that's always a really fun thing. But in addition to that, also going to be celebrating with UGA there as well. So you got a homestand coming up against the Reds, against the Washington Nationals. But on April 13th, it's a day game, 12:20 start there for that. You're going to have both trophies on hand, the Braves trophy and the Georgia National Championship trophy. So the World Series trophy and the Braves trophy on hand at the same time. And so if you've got a ticket to the game there that day, from 10 a.m. until noon, you can actually get your picture taken with both trophies. What an unbelievable photo op that's going to be for those of us like myself who grew up big Georgia fans, big Braves fans, to think that both trophies are in the same state at the same time because of these two great teams. It's just a really fun thing. In fact, in honor of all of this, on April 13th there for the big day, we are going to do DawgNation Daily that day live from Sport and Social, which is a great bar restaurant right there in the Battery, Atlanta. So we're going to be there for that with both those trophies and just celebrating the return of Major League Baseball, but also the presence of both those championship trophies, the World Series trophy and the National Championship trophy in the same place at the same time. So buy your ticket. Come see me there that day at Sport and Social doing the show. Get your picture taken with both those great trophies and enjoy the return of Major League Baseball. Champions Week against the Reds, against the Washington Nationals. A whole lot of fun. Let me give you the website one more time. It's braves.com/Champions Week. That's braves.com/Champions Week. What a great thing. I mean, so much good stuff going on right now. Great stuff going on for G-Day. Braves are back. You got Masters this week. I mean, you just couldn't get any better than that. So I can't wait to see you April 13th from the Battery, Atlanta. I'll be at Sport and Social. Braves are back. Both trophies there the same day, the same time. Games at 12:20. Get your ticket. Get your picture taken with both those trophies. Man, that is going to be a good time. I can't wait to see you there for that. So that's coming up on April 13th. So we just got so much stuff coming up in the days to come. This is the last live show we are doing for this week. We'll have a very good Wednesday, Thursday, Friday edition of our show, but they will be pre-recorded. Now, we're pre-recording them today, so they're not going to be like crazy dated. It's not going to be, one of those things where it's dusty and old. It's going to be, fresh new content, things you haven't heard before. But a couple of, scheduling challenges make it necessary for us to do that. So heads up on all of that. But we will see you for some really good shows the next couple of days. About the only thing that will be really, truly different is we just won't have live comments during the broadcast. But with that said, let's transition now to our golden shoe. And speaking of championships, a lot of folks with UGA ties enjoying some championship celebrations right now, including former Dog Leonard Floyd, who is a Super Bowl champion with the LA Rams and was on hand at WrestleMania over the weekend. He had a championship belt made, or they gave him one of the Rams. See the Rams logo on the WWE belt there, and he brought that with him to Dallas. And a lot of those guys were talking trash to those Cowboys fans in attendance there. It was really fun to see. So Leonard Floyd living his best life there at WrestleMania. Shout out to him. We'll make him a golden shoe winner for today. And remind you, lousy, stinking Gators, no championships to celebrate there. In fact, it's been 4,835 days since those lousy, stinking Gators have won a national championship in football. Long title drought. And they've got another loss coming to UGA just 207 days from right now. That is our Gator Hater Countdown. We will see you tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. And on video. Time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. So apologies for this being the last live show of the week, but I do think you'll enjoy the shows we have planned coming up for you the next couple of days. I think that'll be really, really good. All right, so that is all on the way. But for now, let's get your comments. Let me go Facebook first, and then we'll do a few comments, and then we'll kind of bounce out of here after that. So, on the Facebook front, hope everybody's doing really well. Lorenzo Fleming gives you a lousy, stinking Lizards. I like that for sure. Keith Volt says, can't we still comment on those recorded shows? Yes, I misspoke, Keith. I apologize. when I say no live comments, you can still comment with each other, and you should. I mean, I can't read live comments, so apologies from me for misstating that. But you're all half the time I'd rather talk to each other than talk to me anyway. So yes, you are absolutely still free to talk to each other. That's exactly right. Yeah, he says, Keith says they'll all still be in here talking live. That's exactly right, and you should be, because that's what all the fun's about. Randy Hall says, how about the 4 tight end set of Bowers, Washington, Gilbert, and Delp, Air Jumbo? Yeah, I mean, as long as one of them is on the attached line of scrimmage, you can have 4 tight ends in the game, can't you? Like, I'm probably not as well versed in the rules sometimes as you might think, but that sounds great. I think it's a great idea. Oh, yeah, by the way, shout out to Matt Rukveen, who did say this on Twitter, and he's right. And I meant to give Matt some credit for this, and I forgot to. So Matt had already called for a Georgia-Washington game as a way of settling the whole Go Dogs thing, or not so much settling it because it doesn't need to be settled, but as a way of just kind of reminding those UW folks that this is what it's all about. So absolutely, Matt, you deserve credit for that because you brought that up a long time ago. Walter Pegg on the subject of going after Brew McCoy. I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. Philip Jordan Wells says that's the belt he had at the Super Bowl. That's right. That is Floyd's belt from the Super Bowl, which is really cool. Let's see what else. Tennille Calvino gives you, it's great to be a Georgia Bulldog. I don't know that anybody's more present in all 3 of our comment sections than Tennille is. Like, we have a couple people that kind of pop into a couple of the comment sections on a regular basis, but Tennille is a fairly regular presence in all 3, which you love to see. Philip Jordan Wells says, going to the boat. Are you going to be on the cruise, Philip? I'd love to see you on the cruise. That'd be awesome. Kathy Aquavia Green checking in today. You always love to see that. A couple times lately on Facebook, I've noticed a comment has been hidden. Like, I've never hidden a comment. I wouldn't even know how to hide a comment. So I don't think so if you ever see your comment hidden, I didn't hide it because I don't know how to. But I have noticed a couple of them have been hidden lately. But they're not even like bad comments. I just think something's happening. I don't know. But like I said, it wouldn't be me because I don't even know how to do it. Paul Amerson says, what does the transfer portal look like? So I'm going to talk about this tomorrow a little bit. Like Legend Cavazos, remember that name? He's in the transfer portal now. I don't necessarily know that Georgia's going after Cavazos, but it's an example of, like, he just popped in there yesterday. So for those of us who follow this stuff pretty closely, we're going to see some names we know show up in the portal. And that's before, it may not be, like, at one point in time, Georgia was pretty heavy into the recruitment of Cavazos. I haven't really heard much chatter about Georgia being after him as a transfer. That's one of those things, if that were the case, you'd probably hear it pretty quickly, and I haven't really heard that yet, so it may not be much of a thing. But there are about to be some very interesting names go into the portal. Now, maybe one of them's a Georgia name too. That's always a possibility. But you're about to see some interesting names going into that portal, I believe. Philip Jordan Wells, Georgia was heavy on him at one point in time. Kathy, I'm glad you're here. I'm always happy to see you. And Tennille says she's a super fan. That is indeed the case. Tennille's the best of the best. Mike Little says, how's the special teams looking with the new kicker? Yeah, Kirby talked about Brett Thorson, the new punter, the other day, and when Kirby let him watch practice a little bit the other day, I think about half of what they saw was Brett Thorson punting, so a lot of our media folks can give you eyewitness accounts on seeing him punt the other day. Yeah, so Brian Whitehead, one of the things we announced today is for G-Day, we're going to be doing like post-game show at the UGA bookstore as per usual. That's not going to be changed as per usual. We're also going to be live with the Players Lounge at Creature Comforts before the game. We'll do our Kroger kickoff from there, and we'll have a lot of former Georgia players on the show. They're live from the Players Lounge big tailgate event from Creature Comforts, which is going to be really fun. That's going to be really fun. Tino Calvino says, I struggle with the Facebook platform often. Yeah, but Tino, half of your struggles with Facebook are getting suspended by Zuckerberg. We know that's true. DT says the national media knew Bryce Young last year and he elevated further in week 0 against Miami. That's certainly true. Colby Curry, thanks for the kind words. DT says, guess Michael and Connor are heading to Augusta. I tell you this, that's a documentary I'd watch. Mike and Connor. Oh yeah, not Mike. Yeah. So Michael and Connor are not going to be here the next couple of days, but they are not going to the Masters. Michael used to live in Augusta, so he's been in the Masters a pretty good bit. I'm assuming Connor would not turn down a badge if given one, but I do not believe he currently has plans to attend the Masters. I do not believe that's the current case. But with Michael, you never know what he might be doing. Alan A checks in. Always great to be able to see him. Appreciate you being here today, Alan. Good stuff there. Let's go to YouTube because we haven't been there as of yet. We got about 5 more minutes of comments that we can do. Then we got to get off. Did y'all like the game last night? I thought it was really good. College basketball is back, baby. I enjoyed it. I mean, maybe this is just excitement for the Mike White era or whatever else, but man, I haven't enjoyed college basketball that much in a while. Paul Moon says it wouldn't shock if Delp was at least in the rotation every once in a while. Yeah, I mean, I've heard good things, right? And I mean, I just think it becomes a numbers game. It just becomes tough with all the numbers. But Delp's a good player. He's a good player for sure, or at least a promising player is what I mean to say. Dallas Schwartz says Rory wins at Augusta. Can't wait to take you and Jeff out for steaks the night before the national title. So Dallas Schwartz is our great USC guy who checks in, and the national title game this year is in L.A., and he's going to take Jeff and me to dinner in L.A. We're going to go to Lowry's the Prime Rib or what's that place in Beverly Hills? But Dallas Schwartz is going to take us out for some steaks in L.A., which I like the idea of for sure. As far as Rory at Augusta, my short pick, my guy among the favorites right now, he's actually never really played that well at Augusta. He's frankly not really played that well in recent majors, but I think he's been pretty interesting as of late. I got my eye on Justin Thomas right now. I have a little bit of an eye on Justin Thomas here in Augusta right now. Obviously, the return of Tiger Woods is very interesting. I just don't think people fully realize how scary that auto accident really was. I mean, we went a long time from hearing anything from Tiger's camp after this accident. A long time. I mean, it was pretty harrowing there for a while on that, I think. I mean, I'm led to believe anyway. The fact that he's back playing again, and there's always been this kind of battle between, say, Tiger and Phil. Not really on the course so much. Tiger's accomplishments on course dwarf Phil's. Phil doesn't have the career Grand Slam. But in terms of the two big golf brands, and with Mickelson, you're led to believe almost not really welcome in Augusta right now because of some of the stuff that he's had going on, and the fact that Tiger is now able to come back and play shortly after a pretty scary auto accident. I mean, that's a big blow for Tiger and the kind of manufactured Tiger-Phil rivalry too, I would say. Let's see what else. Green Soldier says, another fan base that deserves a countdown. He says it's Tennessee. They talked a lot even while their program was burning to the ground. Now we have to dust off VHS tapes to see their last national title. We're kind of countdown out around here. We've probably got more countdowns than we can keep up with as it is. But I do think that you bring up a pretty good point about Tennessee in that I will be very interesting to see how much trash that bunch is talking coming into the new season. As you said, they talked a bunch of trash before when they literally were trash, they were still talking trash. So, maybe they'll just be saying no matter what. But how big of a game does Georgia-Tennessee feel this year, and what do the Tennessee fans do to kind of make it feel like a bigger game? I'll be curious to see. Baggins and friends not happy with the UW folks. Yeah, I'm very, very happy about all of that. The fact that Georgia kind of gave Washington what it deserved. G. Grace Bama Boy brings up an interesting point. And for once, this is not an argument amongst Georgia fans and Alabama fans. He says, the FBI has Kansas on tape paying players. He says, put an asterisk by the championship they won last night. So obviously, this is the thing that kind of hangs over all of this, is that, and listen, I barely know anything about this. I have scandal fatigue. I just can't keep up with whatever bad stuff is happening in the world. I just can't keep up with it. But it certainly seems like, so you have, LSU after 3 years, they finally fired Will Wade. Arizona got rid of Sean Miller. And Kansas' response to whatever their thing was like, sorry. And then they've essentially like disregarded the whole thing. And they, as a big kind of blue blood brand in college basketball, have kind of dared the NCAA to do anything about it. And for the most part, they were, savvy enough to realize that the NCAA was not going to come down hard on them. I think it's kind of interesting that you've got very little punishment coming the way of Kansas, likely to never come if I had to guess. Whereas like Memphis just had the book thrown at them over was it James Wiseman? Is that the thing that Memphis had the book thrown at them over? I like I said before, I have scandal fatigue. I can't even remember and keep up with stuff like this. But the point is, like, even though Memphis has had some success over the years, Memphis as a brand is about this big compared to Kansas, which is about this big. And so this is just the way the NCAA has kind of always done business. They will, throw Georgia football under the bus because, I should say they will throw Georgia basketball under the bus because in that sport, that's not as big a brand. But, if UNC has some sort of academic scandal or if Kansas has some sort of FBI scandal or anything else, that's just not going to get a lot of attention. So I don't really know what you do about that. And I don't know what any of this kind of means in the new name, image, likeness era in which we live in. I have to say, I don't really know. I'm confused about all of that. But I guess in terms of watching this year's tournament, Kansas included, I guess I don't really care. Like, I've never really cared about that kind of stuff really anyway. I never really understood when the FBI was so interested in it to begin with. And I'm not saying it's not bad. Maybe it is bad. Maybe I should care about it more than I do, but I kind of don't. I don't know. Maybe I'm just too busy or something. But, the fact that, Kansas did what it did, I don't know. It didn't make me want to watch the game last night. As I said before, given North Carolina's history, who's to say who the worst infractor is of all time? I don't know what you do with that. I really don't. All right, 1 or 2 more minutes. Scott Harris says, the punter position concerns me a lot. Camarda was very dependable. Yeah, listen, I think having a good punter is really important. Look at Alabama here for a moment. Over the course of years, Alabama has had all manner of kickers, some of them good, some of them not, some of them terrible. But they almost always have a good punter. And I think that's a good reminder there. Jonathan Aaron says, I don't think that Brock Bowers is going to have the numbers that are good enough to get to New York City. He says they're going to be covering with 2 players all the time. You may be right about that. I will say that one of the things that was always very eye-opening to me was, imagine how much time Michigan spent getting ready for Bowers. And by the way, that's a Michigan team that plays in a league that just has a history of throwing the tight end a lot. Penn State, Iowa, teams like that, even Michigan itself, they all throw to the tight ends all the time. So covering tight ends is something those Big Ten teams are used to doing. And yet, first drive of the game, Brock Bowers is as wide open as I am now. So you may be right that there may be a lot of attention paid on Bowers, and that could suppress his numbers there a little bit. But in the playoff, that didn't seem to be an issue. Even the SEC championship game, a game that was not good for Georgia overall, Bowers still put up huge numbers. You're going to think Alabama went into the game knowing it needed to try to take him away there too. Jay Shipe says, I'm getting the feeling you're avoiding me. I haven't seen your comments, Jay. But sometimes I do have to avoid you because you're always stirring up stuff. Like Jay, now listen, I love you. But you're one of the worst offenders about bringing some sort of like politics thing into all of this. So I don't know. Christy's checking out. Christy, thanks for being here. I appreciate you being here. I will never ignore Christy. Jay, I might ignore. Christy, never. Foster Moss, I can't go there. Crow King 123 says he's always going to get his, assuming that he's healthy. Yeah, that's one of the things. You obviously got to assume that health, but it just kind of comes to a point where, like, the one thing that Bowers can do and this is kind of going back to why I was kind of like saying, hey, maybe we should classify him more as a wide receiver, is that Bowers, unlike the other really super talented tight ends that Georgia has truly shown an ability to run away from people. And that's one of the things I think that makes him so dangerous right there. So Jay wants to meet at pregame. Jay, come see us at the Creature Conference thing. Go to theplayerslounge.io, find out how to get access to that, and come see us there for that. Or come see me at the bookstore after the game. I'd love to see you, Jay. I'd love to see you. I really would. So we'll be at the bookstore after the game, a UGA bookstore. You've heard us talk about that before. And we will be there at Creature Comforts with the Players Lounge before the game. So it's going to be a great, great day there at G-Day. I would love to see you. All right, we got to go. Thanks for being here. Great shows the next 3 days. I'll see you back here for the normal cool down again on Monday enjoy the Masters, enjoy the spring stuff, get ready for Major League Baseball and a bunch of cool events with Dog Nation coming up over the course of the next week or so. So we will see you then for our RS Andrews cool down. Make sure to check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, by the way. I love the AJC's coverage of the Masters. So many great photographers on hand there for that. So many great sort of sights and sounds of all the stuff happening in Augusta. By the way, no peach ice cream sandwiches this year. The supply chain has brought an end to a great Masters tradition, at least for this year. So keep your mind on that. Also, General Assembly legislative session came to an end last night. You can follow that online. Some of those storms are already there as well. So we got a lot of stuff going on. Also, we'll look at the Braves. Kenley Jansen, what does he bring to that Braves bullpen as the 2022 season gets ready to begin? Boy, so much going on. AJC's got it for you. Atlanta Journal-Constitution online at ajc.com. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. We will look forward to talking to you then.